I have just about finished the ribbing. I've got one more stitch left to do, and it's time to move on to the next instruction, which is to change to the larger needle. That's one thing. And the next round, they ask you to knit, increasing a certain number of stitches, evenly spaced. And evenly spaced doesn't have to be absolutely exactly evenly spaced. If something goes slightly wrong and your stitches are not exactly evenly spaced, it's fine. They just shouldn't be all increased in a group together in one little area. They just want them to be sprinkled around the whole thing. And in the case of the size I'm making, I have 68 stitches here. I am instructed to increase 4 stitches, and 68 divided by 4 is 17. Now, the only increase that's described in this pattern is knit front and back. So that's what I'm going to demonstrate. There are other ways to increase, and they're actually all fine. The thing about knit front and back that you have to remember, I just said that 68 divided by 4 is 17, which is true. I am going to knit 16 stitches and then do the increase, knit front and back. Knit front and back is a little different because it uses a stitch in order to make the stitch. Other increases will use the strand that exists between 2 stitches, but knit front and back is actually going to use one of the stitches that you have on the needle as part of making the increase. So you will do your math, you'll divide your stitches by 4, and then subtract 1. That's your goal number to knit across before you do the increase. You will knit 16 and you'll do the increase on 17. I hope that makes sense. And like I said, if things get a little off in the process, don't worry about it. If you have to do your final make one and it's a little closer to the make one that you did before, it's fine. Now, I've purled that last stitch of the ribbing. I removed my beginning of round marker. It's just temporary so that it doesn't just fall off as I'm switching needles. The way I like to do it when I'm instructed to change to the larger needle is to just dive in and do the next instruction with the larger needle. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can certainly slip your stitches onto your larger needle. Just be sure to slip them purlwise, and that will keep your stitches mounted in the proper way. They won't be twisted. So you can opt to slip all of your stitches, or you can opt to just dive in and start doing the next instruction with the bigger needles. I'm going to knit 16. Oops. Okay. And when this sort of thing happens, the stitches are quite stretched out along the old needle. I pull the end that I'm not using out, and that also gets it out of my way a little bit. And now it's time for knit front and back. So here's my 17th stitch. I'm going to enter it like you would for knitting, wrap the yarn around, and pull it through, but I am not pulling the stitch off the left-hand needle yet. I'm going to go around to the back and enter that same stitch through the back loop now, wrap the yarn around my needle, and pop it through, and this time I will pull the stitch off. And now I have 2 stitches where there was only one, and you'll see that the first stitch looks pretty much like a knit, and the second stitch looks pretty much like a purl. That's just the way it is. This won't be noticeable. It won't be a problem. And now I'm just going to knit a couple more here, and now I'm going to do that same thing, the knit front and back with the yarn in my right hand. And I will enter the stitch for knitting, wrap the yarn around like you do for knitting, and pull the loop through. And now I will get to the back of the work, enter that same stitch through the back loop, wrap the yarn around, and pull it through, and now take the stitch off the left hand needle. And there we have the exact same thing, just done with the yarn in my right hand. So you will, if you're going to do this type of increase, knits, and you have the same stitches that I do, you'll knit 16, do the knit front and back, knit 16, knit front and back, knit 16, knit front and back, knit 16, and the last stitch that you knit front and back is the one right before the beginning of round. And when you get to that point, you can replace your beginning of round marker because you will be all on one needle again.